Don't let these months fly by you. There is still time to get in that summer trip. And let's be real, we might want to add the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to our list. The Cleveland Museum is home of all things rock and roll, and that's an expansive definition, y'all. The new SNL exhibit also brings you up close to artifacts from musical sketches like the cowbell, or maybe the glasses from Run DMC, or the dress from Sabrina Carpenter, and so much more. Check out the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to learn more about the music that connects us all. More info is at rockhall.com/exhibitions/SNL 50 Years Music. Today on CityCast Chicago, the city's most tenured Alder person is stepping down, but their seat may end up staying in the family. The city is still behind on lead pipe removal, and Michael Jordan's former mansion just won't go away, y'all. It's Tuesday, July 15th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago is talking about. I am joined by executive producer Simone Alicea. Morning, my friend. How was your weekend?
It was pretty good. It was more low key than other weekends this summer. What about you? How are you doing today?
Honestly, also pretty chill for the most part. I did go out, see Superman out in the burbs with my homie Darius and his family. Oh, we recently started up a karaoke storytellers open mic. So, we host karaoke storytellers once every 2, 3, 4 months, depending on the vibes. But we started a couple weeks ago this weekly series at Brando's, and I sung karaoke there over the weekend. I was not expecting it.
Oh, what'd you sing?
You Remind Me by Usher.
Okay.
That song, I don't know, but the last couple of weeks I had just been singing it to myself. It's just a very toxic song, but once you hear it, you can't get it out your head. And so I ended up singing it live and in person, which was a nice prepper for this weekend's karaoke storytellers at Steppenwolf. I almost never sing, and we had some long-time karaoke storyteller guests, friends, family of the show come through and was immediately took their phones out. They was like, bro, I've seen 10 of these, and you say you never sing. I'm blasting this video out there. So I'm glad I was able to do that, but that means I won't sing karaoke for now another 5 years.
So what you're saying is there's videos circulating the internet of you singing. If
circulating is probably not the word I would use. I think it currently is sitting in some people's phones.
Okay.
At some point you may see me going, whoa, 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 whoa. You remind me of a girl. What a wild song. It's a wild song, but very fun to sing.
That's most of his discography, I'd say.
Real talk. Imagine just sitting there going, trying to sing Confessions too, without the backtrack. It's a wild song. Confessions is a wild album. A wild album. Let's jump into some stories from over the weekend and last week that we didn't get to talk about. And we are starting off with Walter Burnett Jr. This is currently the city's longest tenured city council member, alderperson. He has been in this office since 1995. He is currently the vice mayor, chair of the zoning committee. And Simone, his tenure is not up for another couple of years. We don't have alder elections for another 2 years. And so it was a bit of a shock when at this point, one of the most powerful alders just sort of steps out, says, you know what, by the end of the month, I'm either going to retire or I'm going to take on a new job in city government. That could have been the story right there. Alderman Walter Burnett Jr. wants to step down, either wants a new position or wants to retire. And you know how they do, go spend time with the family. But that was not the end of the story. It wasn't just, I'm going to leave this seat to someone in my current administration or in my staff. It kind of sets up a Chicago old narrative that we've seen play out multiple times.
Yeah, the theme of today's episode is going to be, you've heard this story before.
Yes.
Okay.
I like that.
So it's interesting because Crain's had come out with a report, kind of a few days before about how Walter Burnett was in the lead, in the front running to potentially lead the Chicago Housing Authority. As we've talked about on the show, Chicago Housing Authority has been without a permanent head since the fall and has been one of the many people that Johnson is set to appoint, one of the many leadership positions for both within City Hall, but also for these sister agencies. Crain's came out with a report that Burnett was sort of in the front runner, or at least among, I think 3 or so finalists. And then shortly after that, Burnett announced, actually, yeah, I'm stepping down regardless, whether I get this job at CHA or I'll go do something else. And as you sort of allude to, he sort of gave the classic, my wife wants me to spend more time at home. I want to spend more time with the family. I'm sort of ready.
I mean, he's 61, been around for 40 years. Before being a city council person, he worked in Cook County government. He's long been seen as like a mentee up under one of arguably the most loved and popular politicians, at least in my lifetime, former Secretary of State Jesse White. He helped on the campaign that got Jesse White elected, a position he held for, well, again, the better part of 30 years. And so he has been around. So this idea that he is tired, ready to step down, ready to move on away from politics, that's not the surprising part of it. I also don't even think it's surprising he's seen as a finalist to lead the Chicago Housing Authority. His ward covers East Garfield Park, the near West Side, the West Loop, parts of former Cabrini Green where he grew up. And, probably for me, most infamously, I will remember him as one of the faces that Daley put in front of Cabrini Green residents to give them the bad news that they were going to have to move as their homes were being torn down. But his experience with public housing, redevelopment, he was behind the casino coming to his ward. It makes sense why he's being considered to lead the department responsible for providing low-income families and individuals with housing in the city, running our housing choice voucher, trying to push for more public and affordable housing in the city. Those two things aren't the surprising parts of this story at all. It was more or less for me the timing.
Who is surfacing to replace him? Burnett's son, his younger son, Walter Redmond Burnett. And he's very clear in an interview with Block Club. He said, I'm not a third. I'm not, and call me Red. He goes by the name Red from his middle name.
It's just trying to distance yourself from your father's legacy by pulling the old Drake, call me by my middle name it's a very interesting strategy.
By virtue of his father's rise to power, he and his father have very different backgrounds. As you mentioned, Burnett came up in the Cabrini Green development. The younger son, the younger Burnett, Red, his background is in finance. He worked for Goldman Sachs.
His father, he's 29. His father has led this war and been a political figure. It's also his mom, a former candidate for the 7th district, has also been in and out of politics his entire life.
Former Cook County commissioner, yeah.
Exactly.
His proximity to Chicago politics has been this close, right? He's been there the whole time. He went to Whitney Young. He went to school on the East Coast afterwards, and so spent some time out there. It's interesting. He described himself in this article as a progressive-leaning Democratic capitalist, which I think makes sense in this ward. You talked about the casino that is coming to that ward. We're talking about, don't forget, the United Center is in that ward already, one of the economic drivers in the city. But of course, there's also redevelopment, a massive redevelopment that is slated to happen there. That sort of West Loop area, has been under development for a really long time. Lots of high-rise development out there. There is a lot of economic activity happening.
It's the hottest ward in the city between the United Center development, the casino, like you said, decades of housing, Fulton Market, West Loop. I'd argue, at least from my vantage point, is the unquestioned sort of nightlife hotspot, young professionals,
restaurants
people coming
too,
to town.
right?
Yeah, where you Michelin restaurants popping up in and around that area. And again, when I was a kid, that was factories. That was Smelly River. That was you can still feel the warehouse essence in the neighborhood, but it is one of the most rapidly transformed wards, most economically significant wards across the last 30 years, bar none.
And so, currently the younger Burnett working, he consults now and has worked with a lot of prominent developers, and he does a lot in sort of that real estate world, and says that if he were elected, he would maintain his consulting firm while in office. And so because the elder Burnett is stepping down well before election season, it'll be up to Brandon Johnson to appoint someone to this seat. There haven't really been any other names, at least floated publicly, as to who else Johnson might appoint. And this is not the first time, even in recent memory, that we have had alders step aside, step down, and not just name who they think should replace them, but have that person be a member of the family. It is a shockingly common occurrence here in the city of Chicago. Most
recently as the last administration.
Yes, most recently under Mayor Lori Lightfoot, 24th Ward Alder Monique Scott is the sister of the former 24th Ward Alder Michael Scott, and their transition happened very, very similarly. Michael Scott stepped down before the 2023 election, and Monique Scott stepped in. Monique then won her election because, as we also know, incumbents have a huge advantage.
Name recognition is a big part of ward politics. This idea, when you're running for mayor, and we see it's the reason no alder has been elected as the mayor in 100 or so years, is because it's really easy to get that name recognition and hold on to your seat in your ward. But then translating that to the rest of the city, it becomes clear how siloed some alders can be. Because I'd argue Burnett kind of had the clout that at some point you would have thought he would have maybe stepped into that campaign, but he's staunchly embedded himself in the ward. You walk through there, his face is on so many buses. And again, the timing of this, to go lead CHA that's a $300,000 position, at least what the last CEO was making. And alders make somewhere between 140 and 160, but it would be a pay bump. You don't have at least the same amount of public facing responsibility as you had in the city council. But also, I don't know, if the goal is to keep this seat in the family, this is probably the best time. It gives your son multiple years to potentially run his own campaign, build his own name recognition in the city. This is going to be really interesting because Johnson largely campaigned on the way Chicago's politics were going, our, sort of political nepotism, our big boss system. These weren't
the Chicago way,
yeah,
right?
These were things he wanted to push back against. And, Burnett, for as much as they've built an allyship over the last couple of years, didn't endorse him. I understand giving him the role in CHA and what that means, but I wonder, what incentives does Johnson have to continue this sort of Chicago way? I'd argue a lot of Chicagoans will be maligned by this decision, even if they think Red has, done the community work to put himself in the best position to be an effective alder. It's really hard for me to see how Johnson will spin this as maybe the appropriate choice for the ward, given the political nepotism of it all.
See, I wonder if nepotism is so status quo in Chicago, is so common that, you're worried about how it will look. I don't know if people are gonna look. Is it going to even sort of break as far as everything that's facing the city right now, right? Especially, we just also saw new reports about how the budget is in even more dire straits than maybe we thought with what we have in sort of reserve funding and the kinds of deficits the city is going to be facing in 2026. I think with everything that is sort of happening in city politics, I kind of wonder if this will even register as as something for people to be mad about, you know what I mean? And I think certainly there will be people, and I think certainly, again, to your point, it is, in terms of Johnson's administration, his sort of appointment strategy has always been kind of interesting to me as somebody who is, so new to new to the executive role, new to the executive branch. And, we saw him earlier this year, right? He made that big statement about how he was going to clean house and put in people who, put in people in these various positions who essentially were loyal to him, right? People who were there to serve his vision of the city. I do think it's interesting if Burnett does end up being the head of CHA, that appointment, to what degree does that appointment speak to that thing? As we said, Burnett wasn't always in Johnson's camp, but I think Johnson, you can't make an enemy of the longest tenured Alder in city camp. You just can't. You can't do it.
And I also think the CHA appointment is a little bit,
again, assuming it goes through,
I just think it will chart less controversy than when he was trying to appoint potentially a pastor to the CTA oversight board. I don't think people really scoff at the Burnett to CHA. Again, I think he'll be able to run on so much of the development he has overseen in his ward. And I'd argue we should be challenging what that means. And again, was used as just call it what it is, a blackface and black politician to sell a roses are red, grass is greener on the other side to hundreds of thousands of public housing residents, a promise we have covered extensively that never came to pass. And I'd argue the most amount of development in his ward has benefited the gentrification of the West Loop, the near North Side, East Garfield Park. And so, I think we should be challenging him as he potentially moves into overseeing public housing, because I don't know if public housing has benefited in his ward the most when we think about development over the last 30 years. But I also understand, again, his experience, his direct connection with development. However, I do wonder if we should, I know it won't be that big of a story, but if we should try and make it a bigger story.
Which part? The CHA or
the son, the red replacing him?
I was reading an analysis on ABC from Laura Washington, who sort of, makes the point of you do see this in corporations, right? People leave things to their kids, and it's not unusual in sort of other sectors, and something to the effect of this is it's natural to do this. It's natural to sort of leave things to the people around you. Again, I sort of question that as a premise of well, does it have to be? Is that?
Yeah, I was when the corporation is, or the legacy is our ward. I wonder how the influence of the ward may change going from the longest tenured alder to the youngest alder in city council. I'm interested to see how much the neighborhood either comes out in support or against. And even if it isn't shown during this appointment phase, because so much of that will come down to Mayor Johnson, I wonder how that bode for the election.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's still a competitive election in 2027, again, assuming the younger Burnett is named to this seat. But we'll just have to see.
Look, I know the kids may not want to hear it, but it's almost back to school season, which can be very stressful on families. But one thing you can start checking off your list: preparing your student for Chicago Public Schools selective enrollment exam. It's coming up, and that's where Top Marks Prep is here to help. Top Marks Prep was built by a Chicago tutor who saw what students really need: a structured study plan, plenty of practice, and a way to track their progress. Top Marks starts with a free diagnostic test, then creates a personalized study plan based on what your student actually needs help with. There's video lessons, targeted practice questions, and unlimited full-length mock exams, all tailored to the CPS exam format. That October exam is coming up faster than you think, so don't wait to prepare. Sign up today at topmarksprep.com/citycast and receive 15% off. Again, that's topmarksprep.com/citycast. Keeping the theme going of, you have probably heard us talk about this before. It's no surprise, Chicago has the most lead water service lines of any city in the United States, with an estimate of over 400,000 to date. I'm not saying it's not a surprise as if this is just common knowledge you should know. I'm saying it's not a surprise because years after most cities had transitioned to using other materials, Chicago actually said you have to use lead service lines. You have to build lead pipes into all new construction up until 1986, when the Environmental Protection Agency officially banned the practice. They're moving pretty slowly to combat this problem. And we've talked about the health implications for developing young people, for adults. And recently we got a couple of updates on how Chicago is doing.
So let's start with the actual replacing of lines, because, the latest on that had been under the Biden administration. There were new deadlines had been set for getting those replaced. And for the rest of the country, it was like, okay, we're going to get these lead service lines, which are the lines that connect to the city's water pipes, that connect those pipes to your home. We're going to get all these lead service lines out in 10 years. Chicago got an extension. We got 20 years to get ours out. But a new analysis shows that we are still 30 years behind that schedule. So for the people keeping track of the math at home, that's 50 years to replace our lead service lines. Of course, the reason this is important is because lead is bad for you. There's no two ways about it. It's bad for everybody. It's especially bad for young kids. It can lead to all sorts of health problems. The latest is that we're still behind. We were behind. We've been behind for a long time. We're still behind. We've got some new numbers to back that up. On top of that, another report came out that, as part of this sort of effort to get service lines out of the ground, the city is supposed to be notifying residents, particularly high priority, people who in high priority areas who are at risk of who have these lines like in their homes, right?
A lot of that ends up falling, like so many of Chicago's ills, on the shoulders of the far west side, the southeast side of,
and also the northwest side of the city as well. Just also because there are a lot of single family homes there, and these lines tend to fall in smaller residential buildings. That tends to be the pattern. Again, this is just to notify renters, homeowners, landlords, people who live in these areas that the water is at risk of lead contamination because the pipes are here. As of early July, they were supposed to be notified, like 900,000 people were supposed to be notified before mid-November 2024. As of early July this year, only 7% of people on that list have actually been notified.
So this isn't that they still need to put the list together and they've only put together the list by 7%. It's no, they have the list of people they should be reaching out. And they've only contacted 7% of them. Just want to make sure.
Yes.
Just want to make sure where we are in the.
Surely we have mailers, and I've seen them. They have pictures. They actually have the stuff made. We could send a text. We could send an email. Surely we have ways.
We have an emergency alert system.
Surely we have ways of reaching people. It's just a little unclear what is kind of taking so long. And you can understand taking out lead pipes, digging in the ground, costs a lot of money, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort. Sure. Okay.
We talked with Monica Eng a few years ago, and like the price to replace them in Chicago is higher than they are in other cities. The city doesn't provide the same type of financial aid or financial compensation to help people remove these service lines.
It's complicated. Because we have a bunch of them. We have a lot of them. I understand.
Even if the city did have money and was moving fast to help people.
That's a complicated project. Notifying people? It just seems like the bare minimum, right? That we should be able to accomplish. Like, we had I just think of the communication campaigns around COVID, right? And how we were like, that is a public health issue that we were able to communicate relatively effectively on, right? Particularly around masking, around vaccinations, access, where to find stuff. And don't get me wrong, the vaccine rollout, it was confusing and places signed up, it was tough. Because you're moving, 2.7 million people through lines in I get that too. But it just seems like we should be able to notify people of this issue that we sort of know is a problem, and just to say, like, hey, maybe consider getting a water filter, or hey, check out our programs, for the financial aid that we do offer, the programs that we do offer to help prioritize getting your line out if you have one.
To get something in the mail, they said they will be sending out these mail notifications through 2027. We'll start electronic notifications potentially later this year, but there is a lookup tool on the city's website you can go to that will offer resources, including links to request a free water filter, to get water test kits, and you could just find out, how vulnerable your neighborhood, your block is to exposure. One final story before we get out of here. Simone, it seems like Michael Jordan's former Highland Park mansion just won't get out of the news. Like when we started this podcast, it was on the market trying to be sold for, I think at the time, like 14 million, which was already dropped down from 20 million from years and years and years prior to that. And then back in December, it seemed like it was finally purchased and we wouldn't have to talk about this mansion with the iconic 23 on the gate that no one can apparently sell. I thought it would finally lead to news now that it had a new owner. We had some new plans, but apparently this mansion is going to remain with us till the end of time.
No, because it's an Airbnb now. You can pay to stay in Michael Jordan's former mansion. Yeah, stories you've heard before. Because the minute I told you this story, I was like, oh, maybe we should talk about the $15,000 a night MJ mansion that we could stay in. You were like, didn't they already open that up? Didn't they do this? Didn't they open it up to an Airbnb? And then we later found out that was actually Scottie Pippen's former mansion. But no, the MJ mansion up in Highland Park, as you said, was languishing on the market for over a decade, and it sold at a very heavily discounted price. I mean, this place is something like 7 bedrooms, 17 and a half bathrooms. It is certainly a product of its time. I don't think anyone would call this, a timeless classic piece of suburban architecture by any stretch of the imagination. And so I think that's partly what makes it really unique. Obviously, of course, the price is just insane. In the end, it was sold for some $10 million. But now, yeah, I'm literally looking at the Airbnb listing.
Yeah, me too. It's called Champions Point Legendary Living.
Yes. Entire home in Highland Park, Illinois.
Movie theater, game room, gym, laundry area.
Cigar lounge.
Mm-hmm. All Michael Jordan-esque amenities. Outdoor pool.
$15K a night. 12 guest limit. No parties. No parties allowed.
My own problem with Airbnb, but like you are set up as a place for people to not only go on vacations, but to rent these mega mansions. And your rule is you can't throw a party. Who's renting out this mega mansion to just come like chill?
I don't know who this listing is for. Like,
I don't know at all.
If I am getting 11 of my friends together to go to a mansion in Highland Park,
I don't see a single mention of Michael Jordan in the Airbnb listing. So at this point, I'm wondering, like, is it really just the news headlines keeping this MJ connection together? The person who put this up, who purchased this home back in December for about $9 million, John Cooper, it doesn't seem like he's selling this as the former Michael Jordan estate. And I was really pissed when we were talking about maybe doing this, because every time I Googled it, it would just be like former MJ mansion for Airbnb, which I understand to make it like salient for the rest of us. But it seems like the guy has kind of moved on from selling it that way.
Why else would anyone pay $15,000 a night? Like, even for a mansion that nice?
It seems like the guy wanted to maybe lean into that former MJ connection. When he first purchased it, it seemed like the goal was to maybe split up the property, turn it into some sort of a timeshare. But yeah, we were looking at this on a map. I'm just like, it isn't directly on the lake. And so, like you, I don't know who they're trying to sell this to.
We have talked about a few outrageously expensive things on this show, right? We recently talked about the Great Lakes cruise, right? That was like $6,500 a head, right? From Chicago to Toronto. We have talked about a $13,000 martini that came with a tennis bracelet. Where would you rank staying in MJ's former mansion on that list?
To be honest, it was going to always be pretty low, but at least when there was 23 on the gate, apparently they had to remove his Jumpman logo from the basketball court. So the fact that the only thing that's really connecting it to Michael Jordan at this point is the fact that he used to live there and tried desperately to get rid of this, to the point that the price dropped from $30 million to $9 million over the course of a decade.
$9.5 million. That $500,000.
Yeah. It rings very low because the entire story of this mansion feels pretty. Desperation's not the right word, but it feels the word I'm not, yes, but also like the allure of this mansion is that Mike used to live here. But when the entire story is Mike couldn't sell it, Mike ain't lived here in 30 years, nobody wants to buy it, it isn't a thing that seems very highly celebrated or highly valued by the people in that tax bracket. And so for someone like myself who's being asked to come in and rent it for $150K a month or for $15,000 a night, and I can't throw parties, it's at the absolute bottom of the list. I would rather have a bracelet I could wear every single day, or at least go on the Great Lakes cruise where I'm going to get a bunch of pictures in a bunch of different places. At this point, it's just a mansion with a tennis court and a basketball court and a theater. And I got to put in the caption, it used to belong to Michael Jordan. It don't even speak for itself. So I hated the idea of the $13,000 cocktail and the $7,000 Great Lakes cruise. But I think those are far better bargains.
I think even it would only be worth it if Michael Jordan showed up to get drunk and tell stories. That's the only way you could make this worth $15,000 a night.
No, you could make it worth $15,000 a night if it was a museum, if I was going to leave with a pair of his game-worn shoes or something. It'd have to be more experiential. They're simply selling, go into the room he used to be in all of these years ago. There's nothing to, like, they're not playing no Space Jam. They're not running his baseball highlights.
No, I want a live action shadow cast of Space Jam 100%. In the like. That's what I want. You know what I mean? Like,
I need a room where the cutout from Home Alone is, and it's put on a train going in and loops around the room. Like, make this an Airbnb experience.
And it like comes with like, 2 tickets to the UC, right? To like,
exactly.
Like, you know what I'm saying?
It needs to be a full thing. I need to be leaving with a pair of shoes in my size.
Yeah. I think I would take, of those 3 things you mentioned, I think I would take the cruise, actually. I definitely think this Airbnb is a bad deal. But that cruise is starting to look better and better, okay? Cleveland notwithstanding. You get to see Niagara Falls. Like, Toronto's a cool city.
I take the bracelet.
I take the cruise, I think.
We want to hear from you. 773-780-0246. You taking the former MJ, can't say MJ's name or face legal recourse weekend at the mansion? You taking the cocktail and bracelet, or are you taking the Great Lakes cruise? I want to give a huge thank you to our executive producer, Simone Alicea.
Hey, thanks, Jacoby.
Always a pleasure, my friend. Before we get out of here, I want to share a neighborhood shout out with y'all. Remember, City Cast Chicago neighbors, aka our members, have a chance to shout out local businesses and organizations, neighborhood hotspots, and we feature them on the podcast and in the newsletter. Today's comes from Katie M., who's shouting out Volumes Book Cafe on Milwaukee Avenue in Wicker Park. They say, we love to grab a coffee and browse for new books after Saturday morning story time. I love to pull up on Volumes my damn self. I usually stop by after popping up on Una Maze a couple of blocks down. They got nice clothes, nice accessories. I done got some candles there. I got a squirrel bowl, but my favorite, probably they gummies. Yep, they got these packs of assorted sour and regular gummies. I grab it every single time. But y'all, if you want to get like Katie and you want to shout out something in your neighborhood, something across the city that brings you absolute joy, makes your experience in this city all that more special, then sign up to become a CityCast Chicago neighbor. Plus, you get perks like ad-free listening, invites to members-only events, and a neighbor-exclusive email previewing Chicago's best events. All you got to do is join now at membership.citycast.fm. This weekend, Build Coffee and Books in Woodlawn is back with another Saturday book club starting at 2 o'clock. They're going to be discussing Marsha, The Joy and Defiance of Marsha P. Johnson by Tourmaline. I will drop a link in the show notes. And please stop by Build Coffee and Books. They have recently renovated and reopened. Selfishly, the homies own it, and so I just want to see it thrive. But also, if you got a coffee shop, a community space that you want to show some love to, sign up to become a CityCast Chicago neighbor, and we will blast that information across our feeds and inboxes. But remember, we always here for your ideas, your thoughts. 773-780-0246. This show, this newsletter isn't what it is without you. And so feel free to contribute whenever, however. We're going to be back bright and early tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Peace.